welcome you to this event of the Nordic Council of Ministers on sustainable consumption and production as building blocks for a greener economy. My name is Karin Taipale, I come from Finland, and I will be facilitating this event. And I'll just start by saying that there's a lot of information on the table in front. Some of it is published by the Nordic Council of Ministers, and some of it belongs to my own background, which is the Marrakesh Task Force on Sustainable Buildings and Construction. So please take advantage, and there are also memory sticks with information provided by the Nordic Council of Ministers. But for the official opening of the event, may I ask Dr. Hannele Pokka. She is the Permanent Secretary of the Finnish Ministry of the Environment, and Finland is chairing the Nordic Council of Ministers, and that's why Finland is also happy to host you here today. Dr. Pokka.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to this side event. And as it was already mentioned, Finland is chairing the presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers this year. The Nordic presidency provides us a valuable opportunity to make linkages between the work we are doing with our dear Nordic neighbors and the global agenda for sustainable development. Allow me first very briefly to inform you about the host of this event. So what is the Nordic Council of Ministers? The Nordic Council of Ministers was formed in 1971 by the 5 Nordic states, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden, and the 3 autonomous areas, the Faroe Islands. The cooperation is one of the oldest and most comprehensive regional partnerships anywhere in the world. It's based on common values and aims to enhance the region's skills and competitiveness. The Nordic countries have cooperated on sustainable development for over a decade. Based upon a declaration of the Prime Ministers, a renewed strategy for sustainable development sets short-term priorities until 2012 and overall goals up to 2020. The Nordic countries are also deeply committed to the global agenda on sustainable development. One indicator of it is the 2 intertwined events that the Nordic Council of Ministers is organizing here during the CSD19. The deliberations of the expert seminar on sustainable consumption last Sunday will hopefully give a scientific background for the more political discussions of today. Distinguished ministers and delegates, the objective of this Nordic side event is to look forward to the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio+20 in June 2012. We hope to have a fruitful discussion on the interlinkages between sustainable consumption and production and the Rio+20 theme green economy within the framework of sustainable development and poverty eradication. I believe that one of the greatest strengths of the Nordic countries is the ability to face and cope with a range of challenges in a down-to-earth way. We believe that this is what a green economy also needs. When making political decisions on solutions for a greener economy, one of the most important questions is how can we reduce the environmental impacts of production and consumption and at the same time create new decent jobs and welfare for all. We in Finland consider sustainable consumption and production an important building block for a greener economy. We are very happy to hear your views on this and learn from your experiences. So once again, please, you are very welcome to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pokka. And let me now introduce to you the panel of speakers. And I can assure you, and you can see, that they are hand-picked, fantastic ladies and gentlemen. We need always a token man in the north as well. Our first speaker is going to be Professor Jacqueline McLeod, who is the Executive Director of the European Environment Agency since 2003. She has a profound academic background and a very global and interesting background as well. The second speaker is the Minister, Her Excellency Minister Karen Ellemann from Denmark. She's Minister for the Environment, but she's also here in her capacity as a Minister for Nordic Cooperation, and also in her capacity as representing Denmark, that will be the President, will hold the presidency of the European Union while we are in Rio next year. And she comes from a long line of Danish politicians. The Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister Rejoice Mabudaffazi comes from South Africa. She's the Deputy Minister of Water and Environmental Affairs. She has a very solid political background. Also, she's been a member of the Parliament since 1994, and she's a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. And also, which is nice to mention, and in this connection, that she's co-chair of Global Network of Women Ministers and Leaders of the Environment. A group of people who also met in Finland a few years ago. And the reason also, it's not a coincidence, of course, that we have somebody from South Africa, because the President of South Africa and the President of Finland are co-chairing the high-level panel that's preparing for Rio +20, the Secretary General's high-level panel. There's an empty chair, but don't worry. Dr. Ashok Khosla will be coming shortly, because he's at the moment at the other end of the building, launching the UNEP's decoupling report. There's a press conference, but he'll join us soon. And of course, Ashok Khosla has an incredible background in environmental affairs. He's a former head of UNEP. He's president of the IUCN. He's co-chair of the resource panel, and that's why he's also at the press conference now. He's president of Club of Rome and director of development alternatives in Delhi, in India. And then we also have Mr. Thomas Jacobs, who has his own consulting agency in California, Jacob Associates. But here he represents the American Chemistry Council and the International Chamber of Commerce. So he's in the capacity of a major group representative of major group business and industry. And he's somebody who knows his way around different environmental multilateral agreements and organizations. And the setting is such that we will ask Professor Jacqueline McLeod to open with a background statement from her research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with such a fantastic panelists, a panel and participants. My job really is a little bit different. In fact, it is to report on the outcomes of the expert seminar that was held on Sunday. It was extremely well attended, I must admit, so even though it was a sunny Sunday, many people turned out. The idea very much was to take the bridge between today's discussions around sustainable consumption and production and obviously sustainable development towards Rio, where we see green economy emerging very much in the language. And so the seminar itself was trying to make that bridge, looking at many different aspects. So without much ado, we have a summary of the main points. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but I'm certainly going to try and give you a helicopter view of what was decided. We had 9 panelists in total, people from the Philippines, from Chile, from the European Union, from the US, so a very, very good broad cross-section of participants. So in the first instance, we were looking at, well, what is the green economy in this broadest setting? And despite the many definitions, or at least discussions, it's very clear that we're talking about policies and innovations where we're able to really look at value generated from a system which preserves the natural capital that are sustaining us. And it's this major link between the two that I think motivated a lot of the conversations during the panelists' debate. There was also a session, sort of theme, that looked at, well, what is the reality of green growth? And rather than simply saying that out of our financial systems and our economic growth comes the sort of natural capital, it's quite clear that it's the other way around. And we referred in passing to some studies that have been done looking at the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. But there's a fundamental need within the green economy to articulate how we will do our business with the resources we have on planet Earth. Another theme that came through was also to do with the fact that it's not only about resources, natural resources, it's also about the resource of time. Using our time wisely, and this is a wonderful billboard from 1937 from the US, and you can see that there's a great claim here to have the world's shortest working hours. I'm not quite sure that's still the case, but nevertheless, it really enhances the idea that it's as important about how we structure society as the kind of stuff that we put in it. One of the elements that was put here and has certainly been running through many of the side events is this idea of the relationship between our sort of quality of life and GDP. And this was a table that was drawn from some earlier data, but nevertheless brings home the message that there isn't a simple relationship between GDP and how long you live. And certainly, it's part of the knowledge base to find out what is it that actually drives quality of life at the same time as health. So some basic attempts to look at resources, and we had a marvelous set of data and information that came in from around the world, but one in particular which resonated was this explosion within India of not only a middle class, but a middle class that has access to the kinds of technologies which will have huge consequences for resources. And here is one example relating to mobile telephones. And you can see the inexorable increase from 2009 up to 2014 in terms of new mobiles. And then, of course, the simple subscriber base almost increases by another third. So these are phenomenal forces at work, trying to draw out resources in a way without constraint as we currently sit. And of course, linking that back to the human endeavors to put resources into those manufacturing processes, in the end can sometimes be linked to some fairly difficult truths. And one of the stories that we in the agency and others have been looking at is the link to mining and the link to child labor. And this is a story in a report that we launched this week about a young boy called Chance. He's 12 years old, and his conditions to extract cassiterite, one of the major elements that's used within mobile telephones, where effectively going underground for nearly 3 weeks at a time, simply to give us some of the resources for the lifestyle that we have here. So linking it back to human endeavor is very, very important. It was seen as something that should not be left behind in our discussions on the green economy. As well, it is about social setting, and the discussion of where do we sit in society is as important as how much money we have, and some work that was referred to around the idea of status. In fact, this particular set of research has linked the idea that if you are somewhat wealthy and maybe sitting on your own in Canary Wharf, you're unlikely to lead a very wealthy, healthy life for a very long time compared to maybe someone who's the head of the knitting club in the local village. So there's an idea that we need to really understand social inequities at the same time as understanding maybe inequities in access to resources. Because in the end, it is about avoiding the marginalization of people. So the knowledge base has, in fact, to include not only substantive understanding of the resources and their accessibility and their sustainability, but also about human resources. One rather headline-grabbing presentation included this side, and this was about the link between activities and happiness. And I think the headlines did include the top word with 3 letters in it, noting that it was the one that generated the highest happiness, and that the corollary towards energy intensity was a very nice one, which showed that you don't need very much energy to be extremely happy, according to this particular graph. And the thing that we hate the most, commuting, actually uses lots of energy. So this was a slightly amusing, but nevertheless very serious attempt for us to understand that sometimes we really do need to relook at where we are spending and how we are using our energy if we want to look at well-being and quality of life as a significant part of the green economy. And selling the green economy requires us to think about these aspects as much as being efficient with our resources. Some of the suggestions, and there were many that came out, were around trying to not pick on simple ideas that had no other reverberations, the idea that you can have catalytic actions that actually cause change in more than one arena. And here we see one particular analysis which says, yes, there are many activities that have to do with consumption, and in particular transport, food and drink. These are areas which have large environmental impacts, and that if we are to look at what a green economy shapes up as, it's very important to understand how we spend our money in relation to all of these environmental impacts. So there's a lot there within our consumption model to be addressed long before we actually start to come to more of the deeper systemic changes that we need to face. So we saw that consumption was a tremendously important part of making a vision of the green economy, as well as the move towards more technology and attention to the details of how different sectors run. There was also a very strong pointer towards being specific on items such as waste. And here you can see one of the inputs from one of the panelists, that in fact much of the food that we buy ends up being thrown away. And in fact, food waste across the whole life cycle is an extraordinarily important element when we come into trying to make certain that we make best use of our land. Taking the idea of farming into an urban setting, being more efficient about the way we look at the way we grow food and the way we bring food into the marketplace, being more innovative more generally in response to climate change, imagining that we might live next to our neighbours but have to take a boat ride to get to them instead of a car. All these ideas are things that mean that in the future, a green economy may mean very different landscapes than the ones we have today, things that we will perhaps have to get used to. And even moving into, in a sense, offshore islands. So these are all things that are in the green economy, but fundamentally the idea that innovation works still remains at the core. But it has to be linked, as was said by many of our panelists, to people. And connecting technologies and innovation to people was perhaps one of the strongest messages that came through in terms of all the actions that were suggested. And using imagination, combining things that we've never done before in ways that we've never thought about. So thank you very much for that. That's a sort of very brief run through of some of the ideas that we had. We had an extremely vibrant panel, and we used a situational artist, if I can call it that, a lady who captured all the choreography, and she created for us drawings about how the discussions went. And these were some of the pictures that captured the discussions and the words and the ideas that we had. So we have some ideas here. There are some others, and these are all available for you within the context of this side event, but also to be downloaded afterwards. So this just gives you an idea of how exciting an event it really was. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Jacqueline. I hope we'll have an as lively discussion after all the presentations. But let me pose one question to you, Jacqueline, first. Yesterday, Jeffrey Sachs said that we need more information and that we need an information network maybe led by him. But in your view, Jacqueline, what kind of knowledge do we actually need, or is it something else we need?
Far be it from me to criticize Professor Sachs. However, I actually, in the business that we run, so to speak, in the European Environment Agency, one of the fundamental lessons you learn is that there is no one place which holds all of the knowledge that we need. And what we need more of is smart governance that enable people to bring their local knowledge, their experiences, even as eyewitness accounts, to really build a substantive knowledge of how we will go together towards something like a green economy, and that there is no preset or precedence from any one sphere. And I think one of the lessons we've learned is that even academics have vested interests. There are paradigms that they cling to, and one of the ideals I hold is that we need to discuss those today. None of them, for example, remain for me areas that cannot be touched and changed. So I think knowledge should be shared across networks. I don't think the idea of having one central place is pertinent to a green economy.
Thank you. And now the two political comments, more political points of view from the two ministers. Minister Karen Ellemann, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, excuse me, my voice is a bit bad. I caught a cold. But anyway, let me start by thanking the Nordic Council of Ministers, and Finland especially, for organizing this event. In the Nordic countries, the environment and sustainable development more broadly has always been a strong focal point. In fact, in 2001, when the Nordic Council of Ministers launched its first strategy for sustainable development, it was the first regional attempt to build a clear strategy towards sustainability with targets, timetables, and indicators. So although the physical environment, the geography and the geology may indeed be very different between the Nordic countries, we share a common vision of sustainable development, where welfare and economic development should go hand in hand with the preservation of our natural resources and our ecosystem services. Indeed, this is to me the very essence of a green economy, and one of the topics for today's discussion. But what is it, this green economy? I mean, just another word for sustainable development. What does it bring to the table that is different from the concept of sustainable development? Well, I would like to think of green economy as a way to create a new and additional value in our policy debates. It is about exploring synergies. It is a transition towards an economy based on our values of a healthy life, where our concerns on food and resource security are met, where ecosystem services that are so vital for a sustainable economic system are fully integrated into our decision-making. Sustainable development is still the overarching and long-term goal, and greening the economy can help all of us getting there just a bit faster. Working directly with market and with investors and the business sector is crucial. The market simply needs to work more efficiently for sustainable development. And a green economy is not just about making money from new and greener technologies. It is about changing incentives and behavior. It is about providing new opportunities and creating new demands. It's about establishing sustainable production and consumption patterns. And it is clear to me, as you also said, Jacqueline, there's no one-size-fits-all solution when societies move towards a greener economy. The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities is relevant to observe as ever. But in an increasingly globalized world, working together in changing our consumption patterns is absolutely necessary. As a government, we have the obligation to show the way forward. And let me give you a specific example. Today, all of the Nordic countries are among the 7 best performers on green public procurement in the EU, and it does matter. And what does this mean on the ground? Well, just to give you this example, if all computer equipment bought in Europe had the same, or purchased in Europe, had the same standards as those that are purchased by the municipality of Copenhagen, we would save the equivalent of the annual total energy consumption of Hungary, year after year. Just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude, and not in any way to point fingers of our current EU presidency country. The aim of the Nordic work on sustainable consumption and production is to facilitate the transition towards greener markets by developing, coordinating, and evaluating the necessary policy instruments. Innovation will be a key ingredient in a transition towards a green economy, but innovation in many things, and we need innovation across the board. We need new technologies that reduce the environmental impact of production patterns. We need new business models that encourage producers to take responsibility for the waste process. We need to increase our knowledge base to prepare for climate change and to build our cities. We need to refine the design of products to decrease energy consumption and facilitate reuse and recycling. And we need to find a way to make it easier for companies and for consumers to make the right choice. These are all innovative processes that should be encouraged. Today, the price of products does not always reflect the environmental cost. One of the things we need to work on is to get the price right. This can be encouraged in many ways, but one of basic elements is that we need to know more about the environmental cost of products along the whole life cycle. Once we know that we can use environmental policies and tax incentives to stimulate the market for the best performing products and dismantle support for the worst. We can use regulation and financial support to stimulate the development of new technologies in those areas where we face the greatest environmental challenges. At the same time, we can create jobs and business opportunities in the green economy. We can use campaigns, we can use labeling schemes to increase awareness among producers and consumers about the environmental impact on their choices. I'm very encouraged about the agenda here at CSD19, and I sincerely hope that an ambitious decision is being made to move forward on a 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. It is important that we create a platform to share knowledge and experiences, and it is important, that we cooperate closely. But I also think it is important that we do it with a flexibility actually to allow for each country to define its needs and desires. We need a multitude of programs. The 10-year framework of programs will provide a much-needed contribution to facilitate and accelerate action, and it will therefore be an important contribution to Rio+20 next year. By building partnerships between governments, the private sector, civil society, research community, local communities, as well as the UN system, the 10-year framework of programs will hopefully prove to be of particular importance to the outcome of Rio+20. It is crucial that we promote a fast-track strategy for scaling up successful practices. The 10-year framework of programs have the possibility of being a central means to encourage, to accelerate, to replicate, and to collect actions for sustainable development and bring those to the Rio+20 meeting next year. And holding the EU presidency next year, we are, from the Danish side, deeply committed to an ambitious outcome of the Rio+20 meeting. We are still facing challenges and also new challenges towards sustainability. And therefore, it's a shared responsibility to all of us to mobilize actions at all levels. So in that way, I think that the 10-year framework of programs should be a tool to this end and not an end to itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and we are happy that the EU presidency will be in your hands when on the road to Rio. But let me ask you something. Now that this is a Nordic event, I'm tempted to ask you how you think that the Nordic welfare state or welfare society model relates to the fact that you mentioned that the Nordic countries are leaders in many, if you take several sustainability indicators or procurement, as you mentioned. Is there something that we can learn from the welfare state model?
But I think giving this very specific example on the computers, for instance, and examples, specific examples on green public procurement and the effects that it actually gives, I mean, that makes it very usable, and you actually see a pattern, see a track where you can actually create results. So insisting on the green public procurement and actually developing that path is, well, it's not only a Nordic way, but I mean, we have several examples on that, on creating these kind of results.
Now we go to South Africa, and let me also at the same time thank the South African government for having hosted the WSSD, so that we are on the road from Rio via Johannesburg back to Rio. Please, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this panel and also allowing we as politicians to politicize the talks from non-politicians. Having said that, we feel that sustainable development has gained increasing recognition worldwide as a conceptual framework for development that recognizes the interdependence between economic growth, social equity, and environmental integrity. The phrase has the capacity to restructure development discourse and reorganize development practices, and in a number of ways it has done just that, even if it meant merely adding the word sustainable to the already overused and mixed interpreted word development. The South African economy is moving towards resource-efficient production practices and is progressively restructuring away from energy-intensive industries towards new green industries, which are financially viable and internationally competitive in the long run. Sustainable consumption and production practices are at the heart of our sustainable development strategy, and a number of quick win interventions have been identified to effectively address sustainable consumption practices. South Africa has responded to the commitments made at the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002, as outlined in Chapter 3 of the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation on Sustainable Consumption and Production, as well as the goals and objectives reflected in the Africa 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production that was adopted in the year 2005. To this effect, we've made substantive progress as outlined in the country's review report presented at CSD19. As the world faces serious economic crisis in 2008, like many other economies, in November 2009, the South African government, civil society, and business developed a framework in response to the economic crisis. In that response, we recognized the opportunities in industries that combat negative impacts to the environment and natural resources base, and believed that we would develop strong capacity in clean technologies and industries in order to ensure sustained growth. This move requires significant support and lesson sharing. We would therefore support a 10-year framework program, which includes systems that support incentives for investment in programs that create large numbers of jobs in industries, including facilities that are designed to reduce negative environmental impacts while enhancing natural resources conservation, efficiency, and social well-being, yet contributing to economic well-being. This ideal is in line with the specific objectives outlined in the resource paper. South Africa further wishes to highlight that even though positive steps towards sustainable consumption and production have been undertaken through the Marrakesh process, there is still a lot that needs to be done as a collective, both at a regional and global level. Adoption of a coherent 10-year framework will enable countries to reflect their good practices in this area and to effectively acquire the necessary resources for upscaling such existing and ongoing initiatives. A 10-year framework of programs will enhance cooperation among all key stakeholders, UN agencies, business, civil society, and governments. This enhanced cooperation should focus on upscaling existing initiatives rather than inception of new programs. South Africa has adopted a resource-efficient and low-carbon approach as one of the key drivers of our economic growth path. The implementation of a 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production is one of the enabling factors that ensure sustainable development globally. We therefore urge parties to build on the work achieved through the Marrakesh process to make it more formalized and structured from its current form. We would support a review and reporting system that will allow sharing of lessons learned, improvement of programs, global oversight, and coordination mechanism. In conclusion, we call on parties to work towards a 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production to unblock resource acquisition process and routes, one that will ensure that developed countries take the lead in providing necessary support for developing countries based on national circumstances and needs, one that will have a clear monitoring and reporting framework to track progress and address blockages. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister, for your strong support to the 10-year framework of programs. I'm tempted to ask you as a minister that when you go home and you meet your voters, for example, how easy is it going to be to you to convince them of the profitability of the green economy and sustainable patterns of consumption and production? Is it easy to convince people that it actually will help them to come out of poverty?
Thank you. I don't think we need to convince them because we're already participating, business, private sector. And I mean, even the ordinary person, they already see the profit there of the green economy in all different spheres of activities that are there, all sectors. They can see the benefits, even in tourism, in all industries. And they have organized themselves also as business, local companies, international companies themselves as a business initiative. So already it is there, and for us it's just to strengthen it, and also, I mean, especially in the rural areas, that's where we still have a challenge. Not that they don't understand, but they need support and strengthen this, they can see it. So we don't have to convince anybody. Thank you.
That was a great thing to hear from you. Thank you very much for that. And Dr. Kosla, thanks for coming back from the press conference that I told about. And now the floor is yours. Please.